The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Lovely to have you with us this evening. And good morning to my friends in Australia. Good afternoon to those of you across the ditch. I see Rob from Auckland is with us. Good. Oh, Mick Dougal. Mick, loud and clear. Thank you. That's great. I was going to ask the question. That's good. Ed's on the ball too. Sound is good. Great. Lovely to have all you guys with us. Thank you. Kind of interesting today. Hi, Chris. Yeah, good. Got to have you. Kind of interesting what's happening around the world. And I've headed this webinar, All Change, which those of you who get the Daniel Code signals might have thought we were referring to last night or today in America. It's still Thursday in the States, Friday, of course, down in Australia and New Zealand, when we had a plethora of markets turn just about where and when we said they will. We're going to talk a bit more about that, but there's a whole lot of issues I want to go through with you. It just feels to me that there are all sorts of changes in the air. Let me just make sure I can see this chart changing for you so you can see them. Oh, look who else is here. Stand by. Stand by. Terry's with it. Terry Roberts, haven't seen you for ages, mate. Great to have you. Akshay's with us. Al, oh, Lord. We've got a big turn up today. Really good to have you guys with us. Chris, I've said hello to his tutorial guy. So's Ed. So's Hank. Hank, no rain down there, mate. It's awfully dry, isn't it? Most of us, east coast of Australia, the state of New South Wales in drought. Queensland's about 90% in drought. Very, very bad drought. Worst for many, many years. Jeremy, good to have you with us, mate. Let me know when we can. I sent you an email saying I think I can connect you despite the problems you're having with your internet provider. John is with us. John from Coffs Harbour, good to have you. Must be a beautiful day down there, mate. Glorious here, I can tell you. What else have we got? Lots of people here. Nice to have you with us. I won't delay any more. Perhaps, hang on, Kevin, good to have you from Minnesota. Oh, Lord, Mark, about time we talked. How's your trading going? Mike, the other, we're having a tutorial on Monday with you, mate. Mike, Big O, good to hear from you. Nathan, Peter is the head of the short-term traders. He's a genius at it. I'm trying to convince him to do a Daniel Code tutorial. Learn to stay in markets just a little bit longer, not that we go nuts over that. Mr. Pandy, nice to have you. Lots of people here. Tom from Florida, very good to have you with us, mate. Big roll up today, Bill Ford, nice to have you. Okay, so Mike says, beautiful day in the Great White North. Oh, you're kidding. I don't want to be anywhere near that white stuff, mate. My family loves skiing. I think it's just painful, the snow. Too cold. Far too cold. Midwinter down here, incidentally, and short sleeves, beautiful sunny day. I won't say I'm tempted to jump in the pool, but boy, it's not far off it. Okay, let's move on with the business at hand. You've got this chart. I've talked to you many times over the years about the importance of the Daniel Code numbers. I know some of you follow them very, very closely. Others of you may not actually understand just how important they are. The basic proposition is that markets will not turn anywhere except at a Daniel Code number. This chart you're looking at now, of course, is gold. We can see these were the charts prepared on August the 13th. The last bar on that chart was August the 10th, the Friday. These charts prepared on the weekend. They're prepared on the weekend and on Wednesday night. But this is gold, which has been trying to make a bottom for a long time. And you can see here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bars along the bottom with no target recognition. So to get target recognition, we have to have target recognition happens at a bar high low or on the close. So in a downtrend like this, we would need to see a low or a close at one of these numbers. This is way outside the trading range, so we're into the blue numbers. The red and black numbers above are retracements of the range. And you can see that in this period up until the 10th of August, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bars trying to find a low, and there's no target recognition. That means that that can't be the low. Now, when I say can or can't, remember that everything we deal with in trading is based on probabilities. There is no actual definitive answers in trading. It's based on probabilities, but we use tools to try and make the probabilities so high on our side that we get a distinct market advantage. And this is one of those. So that was the position at the 10th of June, 10th of August, I should say. Let me find the little twitchy bit under here that's supposed to make this move. And see, there it is. Okay, now have a look. This is the gold chart up till today. You can see after that consolidation, it broke down and it went down and it started hitting lower blue lines. These blue lines are infinite. And you can see in particular, if you draw your attention to Wednesday's bar, that we're looking for target recognition at the bar low or the close within 0.1%. That's our variance that we allow. That's how accurate this stuff is. So the close on Wednesday was 1185 against a number of 1184.1. That's close. You know, that's 9 ticks, and we would allow 11 ticks for a number like 1184. So that's suggesting a sort of a sloppy form of target recognition. And then look what's happened today. Today the close is 1184 even against the DC number at 1184.1. Remember, this target recognition happens at the bar low or the close if the market's going down, or the bar high or the close if the market's going up. So today we have almost perfect target recognition. 1 tick variance is that's pretty much 0.01%. Wonderful. So we've now got target recognition. That can be a valid bottom for gold. Now, these signals, because they're based on probabilities, doesn't tell us that the market is necessarily going to go higher tomorrow. I believe it will. It very likely will. It's got target recognition. It's got reversal. It's badly oversold. All those sort of things. It's got a time cycle buy on it for tomorrow as well. And it doesn't tell us how important this, if this turned out to be a low of sorts. It doesn't tell us whether it's going to be an intermediate low, a really important low, whatever. So all of these signals are blind as to quantum. You don't need quantum. What you need to do is be with the trend all the time, and that's what makes the money. So I hope you can see from these two charts I've shown you that gold hasn't been in a position to make a probable low before today. Now it is. This could be a low. It could be an important low. Here's the same thing on silver. Have a look at silver. These were the charts I prepared on August the 10th. And you've got this great long sloppy consolidation. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 days in the same range, just wandering sideways. And there's no target recognition. So no part of that can actually be a low. Now, I know the big bar down, I can see that. It actually goes through the blue line. But that's not accurate enough to give us a low. So at no stage could any of these patterns be a high probability to give us a low. Look what's happened now. Here's silver today. There's your 1433, the Daniel Code blue line. That's on the members chart. It's been there for a while. And you can see today's low, 1431.5. 1.5 points, 15 ticks almost at the absolute extreme of what we'd recognize, 1433. We'd be stretching to say that was target recognition. But you can see the incredible reaction from that blue line. And that actually comes from target recognition the day before. On the Wednesday, that low is 1434.5, and against your DC number at 1433. And today the low is 1431.5. That's gone too far. But it was Wednesday's target recognition that's made this market look like it's going to reverse. It certainly reversed on a short-term basis already. That's how important these numbers are, and I really urge you to make sure you've got these numbers and that you've got them on your chart, because if you haven't, you're giving away a huge advantage. Here's sugar, very close to the same sort of pattern as gold and silver have been doing. It's trying to find a bottom. It's had 4 days just flopping about here, but it's already found target recognition, because if you look at the bar on Wednesday's bar, just go back one from the little red inside bar, that close is 1023 against the blue line at 1024, one tick. That's target recognition on the close. That means we could well have a valid bottom here. So what happened with today? We've got an inside bar with the low of 1024, 1025. That's one tick above the blue line. This is the market's way of telling us that it has found support at a Daniel code number. Doesn't mean this is the low, but it certainly now qualifies as a possible low. Let's move on. I'm showing you more of the same thing. This is the US dollar index, and it's had a tremendous run. We've got most of it, a lot of it in the 6 seal counts. It had to find a number before it could reverse. Well, the reverse today is pretty minimal. My best guess is it continues on its way up in the next few days. But the high of Wednesday, 96.86 against 96.83. Forget the half at the end. That's a bit of finessing. But that's target recognition. That's why we got a reaction today. Markets will not give you a reaction return, anywhere except at a Daniel code number. That's why it's so vital you have these things. I'm going to show you a bit more of this, folks, just to get the idea across to you that this happens in all markets all the time. This is a Forex chart. This is the Aussie dollar against the US dollar. And you can see how accurately this has found the Daniel code number. On Tuesday, on Tuesday, the close, 72.39, one tick away from the blue line. Wednesday, the close, 72.39, one tick away from the blue line. Remember, target recognition valued in the down market at the low or the close. 2 days with closes right on the Daniel code blue line. We had a buy signal for this market today. No surprise, it's rallied. Okay, let's move on. Show you some more of this. If you think I'm flogging a horse here, I am. It's not a dead horse. This is a very live horse. This is vital to your trading, that you take these numbers really, really seriously. This is Euro US dollar. Wednesday's low, 113007. Okay, was never going to turn until it hit a Daniel code number, and there it is. Same thing here. This is the New Zealand US dollar cross. Same thing, almost identical. Wednesday's low, 65.44 against the blue line, 65.42. 2 ticks variance. That's what set up the weak rally today. So these turns are caused. All turns are caused by Daniel code numbers. They'll either be the red, black line retracements if it's trading within a range, or it'll be the blue lines if it's breaking into a new range for that particular move. But markets won't turn anywhere except at these Daniel code numbers. So it's vital you're aware of them. It's vital you have them on your charts. And for those markets that we don't do charts for, it's vital that you're getting the TO3 plus signals to see these turns coming up. Because for those markets where we don't have charts, I put the signals in for you in TO3 plus. This is our daily 6S trade signals. This isn't the whole of it. It's a bit squishy to get it on the page, and Terry's away for on and off for the next couple of weeks, so I wasn't able to get him to help me fit this on a page. I just wanted to show you, we've been running these 6S signals now for probably about 10 or 12 days, and they're going very well, very, very interesting. And this is free to anyone who's interested in this sort of trading, and it'll remain free until we've done a month of this. Is just a test that we're running at the moment, but I know a lot of you are already looking at it and saying, this is pretty interesting stuff. So don't forget the 6 seal. It's on the front page of the website under 6S. You can get those signals every day. We haven't got this total part of this program working. We're still having problems with the model account, and we'll be a couple of weeks at least until we can track this stuff really accurately. But results so far are just what we'd expect them to be, pretty great. Okay, these are the sort of things I wanted to have you thinking about, these major changes. I just got a feeling that there's so much happening in the world economies, world business at the moment, that we've got these huge divergences. We've got the United States booming economy by all measurements. We've got Europe in perennial trouble. We've got Britain and Europe at each other's throats about Brexit. In Australia and New Zealand, we've got this litany of media talk that the economies are so great and everything's wonderful, but wages haven't gone up at all. They've flatlined for 2 years, and they've barely moved in the last 4 years. So, if the economy's so great, why isn't that flowing through to wages? More so in Australia and New Zealand than you'll see in the States, because Australia's a very heavily unionised country. And more importantly, even than unions, is the Labor Party, which is the party of trade unions. And what the trade unions can't achieve for themselves by group bargaining, the Labor Party is likely to bestow on them. And that bears thinking about, because the present Australian government seems to me there's no way of avoiding the implication that it's on its way out. It has been totally and utterly incompetent. Hard thing to say, but there you are. I just don't think it's, if we're not seeing good economic results flowing through to wage growth, then odds are it's not real. It's certainly not real for the vast majority of consumers and taxpayers. So let's have a look at some of these issues here, because they seem to be multiplying every day. The sort of issues that are coming up now, and this is almost all being caused by the change in the US administration. Trump has injected massive amounts of confidence into the market. You know that because you saw what happened after he was elected. Markets just went up and kept going up. The figures coming out of the US for unemployment, for growth, are fabulous. The rest of the world, no. These seem to be very asymmetrical, the markets. We know Europe is struggling. It hasn't solved any of its historic problems. It hasn't solved the problems in Spain and Greece, with the euro being far too strong for them, and on the other hand, far too weak for Germany, which is how they finish up with all the money. They haven't. That's an issue that's been going on for years and years and years. It's band-aid stuff. Kick the can down the road. Eventually, these issues are going to have to be dealt with, because they're flowing over now from just purely fiscal matters into immigration, into border control, into all sorts of matters of social unrest. I mean, Sweden, for goodness sakes, you ever think you'd see the front page that Sweden is having riots, 72 different riots, all caused by these immigrants who have obviously not assimilated or are very, very unhappy. Most beautiful country, Sweden. I don't know how anyone could be unhappy there, other than the winter when it's far too cold for me, but it's still just beautiful. But that's a real outlier, isn't it? And the big issue that we're seeing in Turkey at the moment is emerging markets have been borrowing massively with this lax credit we've had now for I don't know how many years. It just seems to go on and on and on. And for those of you who are old enough to remember what interest rates were like before we had all this federal intervention type juggling, I mean, it's quite extraordinary that mortgage rates can stay this low for this long. And not only mortgage rates, all borrowing. It's quite extraordinary. And that's caused by the Feds increasing the money supply so much that, money's just literally sloshing around. But if you're an emerging market like Turkey and you've borrowed in US dollars, then used the money for your own internal purposes, whatever, swapped it out, but you got to repay in US dollars. And these emerging markets are just getting killed by the US dollar, absolutely creamed. I'm not even sure that they've reached anywhere near their right balance point yet. And how are they going to repay this debt? And there's going to be some who can't. And that's going to be, one of the triggers for what this all change means. I think we're very close to a tipping point. And all of you who come to these webinars, get the Daniel Code signals, know that we've been bullish all the way through pretty much. I'm starting to get a feeling this bull market in America, in a matter of days, it will be the longest bull market in history. And I'm just starting to get a feeling that this asymmetrical markets, that everything seems so great in the States and so rotten almost everywhere else, are just concerned how that's going to all roll out. And it must roll out. We can't. The backwash, when the time comes to account for these massive borrowing sprees that all these emerging nations have been on. I'm just looking at something here. Excuse me. Peter's saying, no euro bond, common euro debt is their Achilles heel. Well, absolutely. And that's the whole structure of the EU, that rates have been set at a level that's really too low for Germany, the powerhouse, and really much, much too high for most of the other countries, including particularly Greece and Spain. We've seen where their bonds should be, their borrowing ability and their real capacity to repay. I mean, it's been constant Euro intervention, EU, European Commission intervention for years and years and years, and it can't go on. Immigration, this has just become such an emotional issue. It's huge in the States. It's huge in Europe for different reasons, and it's huge in Australia. And you probably get the best look at the contrast if you look at Australia. Australia had a huge illegal immigration problem with boatloads of refugees coming in. Now, these are not people who suddenly get a boat and say, I'm going to just sail on down to Australia. These are organised. There are people, the people smugglers are charging massive amounts of money, were charging massive amounts of money to bring these people to Australia. And they finished up landing on the beaches at Port Hedland and Western Australia, Northern Territory, all sorts of places. And eventually, the Liberal government under John Howard now, I caution you, in Australia, that word is backwards. The Conservative Party, what you would probably say is closest to the Republican Party, is called the Liberal Party in Australia. There's supposed to be nothing liberal about them, although they're becoming far too liberal for their own good. The opposition party, the equivalent of the Democrats, is the Labor Party. That's the party of the trade unions. And in any event, the Liberal Party under John Howard stopped the boats coming in. It was very, very tough to do. Required the Navy, required sort of paramilitary response to stop these boats coming to Australia. They've been sent off to camps in places that you wouldn't think were terribly nice to be at, Nauru, New Guinea, and they're just not allowed into Australia. And that's caused an absolute schism between the Conservatives and Labor, the same as you've got in America. In America, you've got bunches of loonies saying no borders, no countries, just let anyone in. On the other hand, you've got the present administration, unlike the previous administration, saying, well, that's not a country. We need to have borders, and we need to control our borders. And same thing in Europe. Merkel went absolutely nuts and said, "Oh, let's have millions and millions of illegal immigrants come into the country," and now they're paying the price for it. And the anti-immigration parties all over Europe are getting traction, are getting results because it's gone too far. And in Australia, we have the highest immigration rate per capita in the world. We have 538,000 people came to Australia last year. This is a country of 22 million odd people. That's why they all seem to go to the same places, the big cities, Sydney or Melbourne. That's why prices have gone nuts. I mean, an average house in a big city like Sydney, and let me tell you, there are parts of Sydney where you wouldn't want tell your worst enemy to go and live. The average price is over $1 million. Same in Melbourne. And by average, look, it's not too flash, the average, let me tell you. And that's this endless push by both governments, Liberal and Labor, to just bring in immigrants. Treasury, of course, has this view that immigration is a positive for GDP. And it is in the textbook sense, but in the reality, when you see it on the ground, it ain't. The Australian people, polls for the last 20 years have said the population is getting more and more concerned about unbridled, uncontrolled, unfettered immigration. The joint's creaking. The streets aren't good enough. The infrastructure is not good enough. It hasn't been able to keep up. And governments are so totally incompetent that the basic things don't get done. For example, we have a freeway that runs from the Gold Coast all the way up to Brisbane. In fact, it goes further. It runs right up through the Sunshine Coast and down south, halfway down to Pottsville. But this is a stretch of road that is surrounded by massive growth in population. Gold Coast, the Gold Coast, Queensland's Gold Coast, which is the equivalent, if you like, of sort of Florida, not so richly and not so extreme, but it's the tourist capital of Australia. Also happens to be the fastest growing city in Australia. And this road, the M1, the main freeway, is a shambles. I mean, you simply can't rely on getting anywhere on time. And the delays are, a 1 hour trip. You've got to allow 2, maybe 2.5. And it's scandalous because the process of building housing, you start with a plan. It has to be registered, approved. The land has to be surveyed. The plans have to go to council with engineering drawings, drainage, street access, everything else you can think of before it's approved for housing. And then housing plans have to be lodged and approved, etc. In other words, town planners have a very, very good view of what's going to be happening from the building approvals, the type of buildings, the number of cars it's going to bring, the number of people that's likely to bring, and they do absolutely nothing about it. I don't want to say the word corruption because that's not fair. The vast majority of problems in government are just incompetence. And there are all sorts of reasons. They're understaffed, they can't get the right people, the councils have to interact with main roads, water and sewerage, half a dozen other government departments, and it's never the fault of the people you think it is entirely, because government is so big and complex. It's failing to perform, and I know this is happening all over the world. In America, it's hard to get by without a conversation on how bad the infrastructure's got, the roads, the bridges. And in Australia, you can magnify that. Same in Europe. You see the big bridge in Italy fell down 3 days ago, 30-odd people killed. Tragic. Infrastructure hasn't kept up. More and more people are coming in. Infrastructure's not keeping up. And I don't think government is capable of keeping infrastructure at the level. I think immigration is just running over the top of government. Government cannot. It's not capable of keeping up the levels of infrastructure that we need. And these are really serious problems. Keep going. This issue of the culture wars. Whatever you say on either side of the divide, I mean, I can remember Bill O'Reilly writing the book, The Culture Wars, maybe, was it 4, 5, 6 years ago? I don't know. And I thought, what's he talking about? Didn't seem a big issue to me. It is now. Whatever one side says, the other side is all over them. There are publications on both sides, Politico, Daily Beast on the left side, Breitbart, Daily Caller on the right side. It's absolutely extraordinary. They're absolutely dedicating almost all of their journalistic time to finding a statement that someone on the other side has made and slamming it. I mean, there just doesn't seem to be any sensible middle ground. And when we get down to energy, I'm going to talk to you about that at some length, if I may, because that's going to be the big battleground in many countries around the world. Housing and debt, of course. We're a full book of that in Australia. We now have two of the most expensive cities in the world. The housing debt bubble very closely mirroring what happened in the States. There's nothing new. We just keep repeating the same problem somewhere else. And people have been buying houses for the most extraordinary prices. I mean, you just look at it and scratch your head and say, you're kidding? Well, no, and they borrowed 90 or 95% of the money to do it. And that's got to come back to bite, as you know, and same sort of thing's going to happen in Canada as well. Yeah, Mike saying 500 a day coming in. 500 a day. 500 a day coming in from the US through the Quebec border, draining us dry. Well, you know, I know it. See it everywhere, but where's the push for that? Amber would like me to get back to Forex. I will do that, Amber, I'm sure. What's Bill Ford saying? Australia needs dramatic population decrease now. Read a time for some climate honesty on peak prosperity. No such thing as infinite growth on a finite planet. Absolutely true. Absolutely true. Okay, let's move on and let's talk about the trade wars. We're going to come to them, Amber. Don't leave us if you're a Forex queen. We've got lots of Forex for you to think about. Folks, this is the S&P. Talking about the asymmetrical economy. S&P is not far off all-time highs. In another few days, it's going to be the longest-running bull market in history. We had that 2883 target sitting there. I mean, you've seen this chart pretty well every webinar for years. Years, it's no surprise. We got the 2883 target, plus or minus a handful of points. And if the market breaks that, the next numbers are up around 3024, 3047. Be quite an adventure if it did. Will it? I don't know. I don't know. I'm seeing a lot of divergence between these markets, and you wonder how much of it's real. This, Amber, is the Aussie US dollar. We're talking about how the US dollar is impacting on other countries. Now, this Aussie dollar is sort of heading down to multi-year lows again. The really significant low was back in 2008, and it's heading down to that sort of territory. It tried to make a low in October 2015. This is actually a 12-day chart. We have much, to go down to weekly, dailies, 6 days, dailies, all sorts of charts. It hasn't made a real low. It's heading down to a lower low. This is not like the other charts, which relate to countries that have borrowed in USD and have to repay in their own currency. This is a reversal of total lunacy. Those of you who have been with us a while will remember me talking to you at various times around 2010, 2011, 2012. The Aussie dollar was up at $1.08, $1.08 US. Absolute insanity. I mean, this is a country that's capital deficient. It's a perpetual borrower of money. And the dollar's up at $1.08 in that period, which is total stupidity. And I would have been touting this chart to you for a while as one of the better markets to be shorting. But this comes for a different reason. This is just coming from Australia is very much tied to China in the public perception. They're our biggest export market. They're very closely aligned with all sorts of issues in Australia, including vast property owners, not just housing and commercial, but rural property. They're trying to position themselves to have a very strong hand on primary production in Australia, and they're doing so. And it's another scandal, but we can't waste all day talking about scandals. This is the dollar yuan. This is the US dollar pair against the Chinese yuan. And I mean, it's extraordinary. Look at what's been happening. You had this big pullback down into January 2018. Since then, it's been straight up. Is China affected by these sort of currency issues that Turkey is and the peso countries? No. China's a command economy. It has vast foreign reserves, but there are consequences with these sorts of a move in any currency. This is what's happening in Turkey, and this is one of the classic emerging markets that's got very significant borrowings in US dollars, and it's going to have to repay those borrowings in US dollars. And you can see if you borrowed those back in 2013 at 2 to the dollar, you're now up over 7 right at the peak here, which means that you're paying back 3.5 times what you borrowed. If you pay it back, the proposition is they probably can't. This is a very interesting chart. Do excuse me, I need Chuck here to tell me to stop smoking. This is a very interesting chart because this is the Hong Kong dollar. And Hong Kong, as most of you all know, is an absolute powerhouse. It's an economic powerhouse. For many years it was the unlisted front door or back door for China. But it's historically been a huge mercantile player and still is. This is a pegged currency. That is that the only way Hong Kong's felt they're able to control the value of their currency is to peg it to the US dollar. So you can see all that support along the bottom of the chart running continually from 2010 through to the end of 2016. Now the US dollar's taken off against the Hong Kong dollar, and you can see this is a 12-day chart, incidentally, so each of these bars is roughly half a month, 22 trading days in most months. You can see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9, 10, so 4 or 5 months, this has been hitting against the upper level of the peg. The question is, can the Hong Kong government, which of course now is part of China, can it maintain the Hong Kong dollar at this peg level? And that's a really interesting question, because this next chart, when it changes, you'll see this is the Swiss franc, and the red line along the bottom in May 2011, gosh, it seems like yesterday, all that 7 years ago, was it really? I'm not sure whether it was that one or maybe it's the other breakthrough, the red line, but the red line anyway is the approximation of the Swiss franc peg, which is dollar chief. Chief is the code for the Swiss franc. And that was pegged for years and years and years, and supported and enforced by the Swiss Reserve Bank. Now, I mean, whoever would have thought they'd be unable to hold the peg? Well, in fact, they were. And I remember this so well. My feeling is it's probably the break in February, end of the year, January, maybe January 15. I can't believe it's the previous one. And we had all sorts of sell signals on this pair, not expecting it to break the peg, but down they went. And it did break the peg. Even the Swiss Reserve Bank, the Swiss Federal Bank, couldn't hold the peg. And those trades finished up being worth $30,000 per one contract in one day. And what happened the next day? Well, Alpari, one of the biggest Forex companies in the world, couldn't open its doors the next day. And there were a whole lot of smaller ones as well that couldn't open their doors. And that's because common with Forex companies is that they'll take the other side of the trade and hold it themselves. They figure the spread's so big that the punter can't win. And almost all Forex platforms have an A and a B list. Some of them have a C list. For the new players, they say, these people don't know what they're doing, well, they can't win, we'll take the other side of the trade. If you're a very good trader and you're beating them consistently, they'll switch you over to the B or the C list, and that means they're not holding the trade, or not holding all of the risk on the trade, but they're laying some of it off to their bank supporters who are providing their liquidity. What happened here, though, was that Alpari was holding a vast majority of these trades themselves on the other side. And when it broke the peg, they couldn't settle. It was cleaned up very quickly. Alpari was a British company. Forex is not a big deal in America, so the American media didn't get terribly excited about it. But be interesting to see what will happen if the Hong Kong dollar breaks its peg. I suspect that will have massive ramifications, because it will flow into the fact that China was not able to support that peg. Hong Kong's now part of China, of course. So there's an interesting thought for you, something to really keep an eye out. I've just got some interesting comments coming in here, if you'll bear with me for a second. So this is Rob H in Auckland. Rob's a very, very savvy trader, really good trader. I've known him for many years. He's in New Zealand. Migrants are piling into New Zealand nearly twice the rate in Australia, more than 3 times the rate of the UK. Figures suggest parliamentary research obtained by Labour, that's the Trade Union Workers' Party, shows New Zealand took in, on average, 14.7 people for every 1,000 in our population during the year to June 2016. Hey, Rob, thank you for that. It's scary, isn't it? Now, that's what's happened. There's been a change in government in New Zealand, and the Conservative coalition's out, Labor's in. And that's what's going to happen to Australia next year. So bad as we think it is at the moment in Australia with the immigration problems, stand by, it's going to get a lot worse. This is Bill Ford saying, we're making decisions based on a faulty economic models, based on a faulty money system. Part of the answer lies in returning to a hard monetary system, whatever that may be based on. Yeah, that's, Bill, what you're saying is you need to bring some control, certainties and limits into this whole fiat system. But what I can tell you is it's going to be very, very hard for that to happen. If you can think you can talk all the governments in the world out of their money printing habits, that's really sort of what's going to take. Let's have a look and move on now. And here's the next thing. We're sort of kind of going to go to what Bill just said. And measurement is only as good as the tools you have. And I want to tell you a little story. Last week, Saturday last week, in fact, my daughter called me. She goes off to she's shotgun clay target shooting on the weekend. She's very, very good at it. It's rather strange. She's a fairly petite little blonde girl and fires a great big 12-gauge shotgun and does it very, very well at the Clay Target Club, which of course is miles out in the scrub, out in the mulga, as we say. And I got a call saying, Dad, my car's broken down. So Dad did what dads usually do, got in the truck drove for almost 2 hours to where she was. And there's her little red BMW sitting by the road. And I got in it and tried to start it. And it started and then stopped and started and stopped. And I thought, it sounds like a fuel problem. Anyway, the car had just come back from BMW the week before after some massive work on it, many thousands of dollars. So we drove up to BMW. Of course, it was a Saturday morning. The sales staff were there. They were plenty ready to sell you something, but no, there were no service people there at all. Couldn't help. Thinking we were in the old days of having some service, I said, would you just go and pick up the car, send a tow truck or something, bring it in here and fix up whatever needs to be done. Oh no, can't do any of that. The concepts of service have gone. You've got to do all that yourself. So I had to run around try and find a tow truck on Saturday, and you'll have to wait for us out there. I said, it's out in the bush. When will you be there? Sometime today. I said, can you give me a time? Well, yeah, today. I said, you want me to go and stand out by the side of a deserted bloody country road for 3 or 4 hours? Well, that's what it takes. Anyway, I took the chance of going out there and having a look and look at this car again, and the fuel gauge was about a quarter full, plenty of fuel there, no warning light or anything. And I thought I'll just try something really simple. I took a jerry can of petrol with me, and gas, you call it, and poured it in, hit the key, and whoosh, off it went. Started running fine. The problem was that we had a faulty fuel gauge. And if your fuel gauge is telling you you've got plenty of gas and you don't have any gas, the car's going to stop. So the measurement is only as good as the tools. There was a unusual issue that nobody knew that this car was out of gas. It was showing it was about a quarter full, and it was out of gas. And that's what I call one of the unknown unknowns. And they're the big, big problems. That's what Bill was just talking about what's happening in this with a faulty economic model. And we are making decisions based on faulty economic models and faulty money system. And what I wanted to tell you about today is what's happening in Australia with the Royal Commission into Banking. Now, you may say, we don't want to know about Australia. I know that 98% of you live in the States or Canada. We have very, very few Australian or New Zealand clients. But we've had this Royal Commission into Banking going, and it's been fascinating because it's telling us things that we didn't even suspect. Now, remember this polarization between the two main political parties. Liberal, which is not Liberal, that's the Conservative Party, and Labor, which is the party of the trade unions. Superannuation is a compulsory form of saving introduced by the Keating Labor government many years ago. And what it does is it is mandatory that a percentage, presently 9% of your salary, wages, income, whatever, is placed into a superannuation fund where it's invested until you reach the age of retirement or some other reason or die, some other reason withdraw your super. And this has just become huge, and it's going to get bigger. It's up to the pot is now $2 trillion. And scheduled to grow and grow. I think in a couple of years the deduction goes to 10%, then 12.5%. It's going to be bigger than the total GDP of the country in maybe 14, 15 years. And then the government set up the systems how all this would be managed. And the main managers of this massive amount of money are the Australian banks. We have 4 major banks. And a couple of others, not much more than them on the side. And the other side was the trade unions became the managers of these massive, massive amounts of money. And the government has spent endless legislation, regulation, rules, drawing up how this money should be dealt with, have independent trustees, blah, 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 all this reporting. We have ASIC and APRA, we have statutory bodies they're supposed to report to. And they're supposed to make sure they're keeping them in line. And, of course, the Liberal government, the coalition government that's in power now, their main client is big business, in the same way that the main clients of Labor are trade unions, organised labour. And they turned heaven and earth to avoid having a banking commission. And it really got to the stage that one of their members, they've got a very, very narrow majority, was prepared to cross the floor if they didn't give in to this. So they came up with this sort of skeletal banking commission. It's a royal commission that gives the commissioner power to subpoena, get documents, put people under oath, take evidence, make recommendations. But it's skeletal. It's got such a short time frame to report that its sitting sessions are literally a couple of weeks at a time in different cities. And it's scandalous. But what it's found out already with this skeletal staff, no real staff, very few staff of its own, some staff are loaned over, shared by the Attorney General's Department, 12, I think. And I mean, you're talking about the four major Australian banks. These are world-class, world-sized businesses. And a properly resourced Royal Commission into banking and financial matters would go for years and have massive staff to find out what's been going on. But what we have found out is extraordinary. Now, remember, these banks enjoy government protection. There's government regulation. The four major banks can't merge, can't be taken over, etc. The banks have government support when we got the so-called global financial crisis. Depositors have a guarantee on their funds for the first. It's varied in times from 100,000 to 250,000. And now we've got this massive amount of superannuation slopping around. And what we found is that the corruption has been absolutely incredible. And more incredible than the corruption has been the sheer incompetence that these people who are running these superannuation funds, they don't know what they've got. They don't know where their clients are. They don't know how many they've got. They certainly have a total disregard of acting in the client's best interest, which is their main credo. Trustees are obliged to act in the client's best interest, and the client's supposed to be the person whose money it is, and they don't. They act in the best interest of their management. We saw a guy in the witness box last week saying, and he was asked why his firm had spent, I don't know, 120, 150, might have been $200,000 on entertainment, tickets to the tennis, this sort of thing. And he said, I wish I didn't have to. But he said, you know, we are by far the best performing super fund in Australia on a 1 year, 3 year, 5 year and 10 year basis. And he said, we lose 500,000 clients a year to the bigger funds. And the Royal Commissioner was stunned. He said, well, you mean being by some way the best fund in terms of returns, you don't keep your clients? The bloke said no. Commissioner said, why not? He said, well, all these banks and all the employers who determine where the default fund goes. Remember, the vast majority of people don't have a clue what super's about. It's terribly, terribly complex. And all employers have what's called a default fund, that if you don't nominate a particular fund to go into, your money will go into the default fund. And basically the employers decide which is the default fund. If it's a unionized business, then the unions get a big piece of it. If it's not unionized, then the employers can put it where they want. And this chap who's the head of the best, by far the best performing super fund in the country, said, we lose our clients, we lose them every year. We have to entertain. And the Commissioner said, well, what is it? Why is being the best performer not suitable? Not enough to keep your clients? He said, well, all of these guys have banks. So if you're the head of a big company, you have banking relations, not only banking for yourself, banking for your directors, banking for the company. And pressure is put upon you to make the default fund something in that bank's control. And they do. And it's you can draw your own conclusion. It's corruption. And it's dreadful. I'd like to go on about this all day, and I won't. But give you some of the highlights. So one of the things they've been doing is they've been charging money, what they call a fee for no service. They charge these fees. These fees just go on and on and on and on. And a lot of these fees are for no service. And they also go on after you've died. If you didn't know you had super and claimed it, the banks just go on charging fees to the dead. And Hayne, he's the commissioner, he's an ex-High Court judge, asked a witness a question this week that highlighted the blindness to ethics. Nicole Smith, former chairman of NAB Superannuation Trust, the NAB's National Australia Banks, one of the big four, was asked by the exasperated-looking commissioner, "Did you think yourself that taking money to which there was no entitlement raised a question for criminal law?" "I didn't," she replied. Yeah, I mean, it's quite incredible. These are people on huge salaries, supposed to have qualifications, be overseen by actuaries, have a board of directors. They failed, absolutely, totally failed. And they've identified, just with this skeleton staff in about 2 weeks, maybe 4, they've identified over $100 million that's been misappropriated on fees, and it's scandalous. And this is all driven by a group of agents. They have these super funds have agents everywhere, and the agents get a commission. They're called financial advisors. They haven't got a clue themselves. All they're doing is sticking their clients into the bank's products, and the banks just Hank, what price no one goes to jail, you can bet on it. I mean, some of these executives are on 20 and 30 million a year. I know that's not a world-shattering amount in America, but my God, it is down here. And it is absolutely the level of it. They're either totally incompetent or they're crooks, or more likely, the system has got so big that they can't really read it properly and they can't really control it. That's what Bill Ford was saying. And I suspect that that is happening. The unknown unknowns, I think, are everywhere. This is such an out-of-left-field situation with the Banking Commission. The government opposed it because the banks are their mates. When it finally came in, they gave it such little powers and such little resources, no one thought they'd find any problem in the major banks. The government thought of rubbing their hands together and said, "Oh, you'll find all this in the trade union control funds," and of course they haven't. All of the problems they found so far, my guess is there are problems everywhere, have been in the major banks. And it's graceful. Here's the unknown unknown. Nobody knew, and they don't know today. The evidence from these witnesses is a litany of, I don't know. I wasn't there at that time. I'm not on that particular committee. I don't know. Just on and on and on. It's absolutely incredible. CBA money for jam. Complacent culture accounts for 21 trillion in missing funds over the last 15 years. That's from Ed. That's from that one. I've read two together. This one from Rob. Money for jam. Complacent culture, dismissive of regulators, bonuses for senior executives, even when found out. Absolutely incredible. What Ed's saying, same problems in the States. Pentagon cannot account for 21 trillion in missing funds over the last 15 years. I mean, it goes on and it goes everywhere. And I think the problems are what I'm calling the unknown unknowns. Now, this litany of errors in Australian banking, I hope it hasn't bored you, because I know most of you are not concerned with Australian banks, but it is a symptom of what's happening everywhere. It's not just happening in Australia. It just happens to have been found out a little bit in Australia. But this is happening everywhere. You know what the pension problems are in the States. That's the equivalent of superannuation. The money ain't there in many, many cases. And it's a massive, massive problem. Okay, let's move on. We've said enough on that. I had a ton more stuff I want to talk to you about Donald Trump and coal. And Australia is the biggest coal exporter in the world, so-called clean coal, low lignite coal. Biggest exporter in the world. Guess what? We're about to lose our last remaining coal-fired power station, and power doesn't come from the wind when the wind don't blow, and power doesn't come from the sun when the sun don't shine. And that's going to be the next big issue if it's not already. I'm certainly going to talk about that the next webinar. Folks, if you want to be a super trader, I'm glad we had so many of our super traders with us today. By gee, they've had a great run. Mick, I'm going to get maybe get a couple of these guys on the show shortly in the next month or so, and you'll be interested to hear what they say about learning to trade the Daniel Code way and becoming a super trader, trading time. Some of the returns they're making are just fabulous. I've never even heard someone suggest that those sorts of level of returns were possible, but we have lots of people doing it. We have 22 slots left for the rest of the year, folks. If any of you are thinking of doing a Daniel Code tutorial, we have 22 slots we're going to be able to handle for the rest of the year. These tutorials, the video tutorials one-on-one with me, take a lot of time and resources, and I can't do an indefinite number. So there's got to be, between now and the end of the year, there's only 22 slots left. So if you're interested in doing a Daniel Code tutorial, get yourself booked in, and any time between now and the end of the year, we can fit you in. Rob, CBA lost details of 20 million accounts. Then they found that out. They didn't tell anyone. I mean, it just goes on and on. It's a joke. It's a scandal. But it's indicative of what I suspect is happening in every big bank everywhere. And as for what's happening in the emerging markets, may not have the technology managed tracking that the Western countries do. Goodness only knows. Okay, anyway, most important, if you'd like to do a tutorial, send me an email. If you'd like me to chat to you about it, send me an email with your phone number and country and location so I don't call you in the middle of the night. I'll be happy to call you and talk about your trading and how we can turn you into a super trader. 22 slots left, folks. Free trials. If you haven't already had a free trial, please go ahead, help yourself. Just go to the Daniel Code website, register. You'll be able to see the success signals for the next, probably the next 3-4 weeks, and they're free at this stage because we're still trying to bed down the program. If you don't have a trading software package, we can arrange a free trial of that for you as well. Here's our compliance statement, folks. I always like you to be aware that it's very easy to lose money trading, and the vast majority who don't know what they're doing, they lose it quickly. Very easy indeed. Don't, I beg of you, risk real money trading until you are confident in your skills, and if you'd like to learn how to trade the Daniel Code, let me know, and I'll be only too happy to come and talk to you. Here's Sue. Lovely to have ladies with us. We don't have many. Sue's up in Cairns. Good to hear you again. Never tire of listening to your views. Thanks for your time. Grand, Sue. I'm glad to have you with us, and thank you for saying such a nice thing. Anyway, lots happening. Keep on your toes. Market's at a very interesting point. Non-confirmations all over on the equities. We may be seeing something more exciting soon. Okay, that's it for today, folks. It's Friday afternoon in Australia, and I've finished for the week. You've got another day to go, so good luck for the weekend. Have a lovely weekend. Look forward to having you with us at our next webinar, probably in a fortnight's time. All the best.